If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored today to have Paul Abrams, who's the public relations manager at the iconic Roto-Rooter Group, which is the largest provider of plumbing repair and drain cleaning services in the U.S. and Canada. And welcome, Paul, to Green is Good.
Well, thanks, Mike and John. My pleasure to be here.
Well, you know, Mike, and we grew up with the great Roto-Rooter brand, so it's so wonderful to have Roto-Rooter on Green is Good today.
Well, thanks. It's been an interesting journey for us for about a year designing this green program, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. I'm proud to talk about it.
And before we go and talk about green, and by the way, for our listeners out there, Paul is a pro at this. He's an ex-TV reporter, so we're turning the mics on him today. Tell us a little bit about this. What is this ghost hunters stuff? What is Roto-Rooter doing with ghost hunters, and what are you doing on television with them?
Oh, gosh, this is the 6th season, I believe, for Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel. Wow. And Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson are real-life Roto-Rooter service technicians out of the Providence, Rhode Island branch. And they approached us 6 years ago about the show and said, hey, this is something we do on the side, but the producers would like to incorporate our daily lives, our real-life jobs into the show if you guys would be interested. And, of course, talking about paranormal stuff just scared the heck out of our senior management team, so they said no. And I said, "Oh, guys, you've got to reconsider. I think this is a great move." And they actually met Jay and Grant and said, "Gosh, yeah, this seems harmless enough, and they're great guys and some of our best service technicians, so let's do it." And we have. It's been great for us.
Well, hats off to you guys. What a great tie-in for the amazing brand Roto-Rooter. And anyway, today we're going to be talking green. And you know, Mike and I, before we brought you on the air, we were on your great website. And Mike's going to talk about that in a little bit. But we were talking about this amazing factoid that you have on your Roto-Green website. And for our listeners out there who want to see all the great stuff you're doing at Roto-Rooter.com, go to Roto-Rooter.com and then click on to Roto-Green. But let's talk about the facts. By 2013, 36 states are expecting local, regional, and statewide water shortages, even under non-drought conditions, according to the U.S. General Accounting Office. Paul Abrams, is there any doubt why Roto-Rooter went into this green program and why you're starting all these green initiatives right now?
Well, not in my mind. I mean, I think it's just the responsible thing to do. As you mentioned, we're the largest plumbing repair and drain cleaning service in the U.S. and Canada. So what that means is that we're in over 4,000 residential homes and commercial businesses every single day, and that's about 1.5 million places a year that we're working on the plumbing. So because of that, we realize that we're better positioned than just about anybody to make a real difference when it comes to water conservation.
So let's talk about that. Explain to our listeners, what does that mean for them in their house if Roto-Rooter comes out and you tell them, make me green? How does this whole thing work?
Well, what we do is we first looked at tried to design a program and thought, okay, we could do A, B, C, D, E, all the way through the letter Z, But then we thought, let's stick to our strengths. Let's keep it, the old saying, keep it simple, stupid. And we realized that, gosh, we work on a lot of toilets. We work on a lot of sinks. We work on a lot of bathtubs and showers. So let's find easy ways to do this. So the first thing that we did is to say, okay, what kind of parts do they make these days that are better when it comes to water conservation than the parts we've been using for years and years? And once we looked around, we found a couple of obscure small companies that were making some really interesting parts. And we just said, well, the simplest thing to do is let's change overnight to these parts. And even just by default, our customers will be greener than they were before.
Well, let's just pretend for a second you're the Roto-Rooter guy, and you've now come to the Brady household, Mike Brady's home. And now you're walking in the front door, and Mike says, make me green and make my home green. How is this going to work? Where are you going to look first? Where are you going to point out to Mike to, do a retrofit on his house on your whole new Roto-Green program?
Well, the first thing Roto-Rooter is going to do is ask if they can do a quick inspection of your home or your business. and look at the plumbing, and we'll take a look at areas that use the most water, and we'll make recommendations from there. For instance, we'd look at your toilets and determine how old they are.
Okay.
And if they were made before 1993, or since 1993 rather, they would use 1.6 gallons of water with every single flush. So what we would recommend is installing some dual flush converters inside the toilet tanks, along with a new, more efficient fill valve that we're using these days. And the combination of those two parts is going to save you a whole lot of water, because if you think about it, 4 out of 5 times that we flush a toilet, it's for liquid waste. So we don't need all 1.6 gallons of the flush power to clear the bowl of liquid waste. So instead, you'll use about maybe 0.8 of a gallon or less. Now, for solid waste, the user is going to want to select that button on the toilet that gets full flush power. So if you push the buttons the right way, then 80% of the time you're going to be saving water with a dual flush toilet. And we can convert it, and it's going to cost a lot less to make that conversion than replacing your old toilet with a brand new one.
Now let me ask you this, Paul. If you were coming out and as John suggested, you came to my house and you started doing this, and you talked about the 1-2 converter, would you be, if I said, geez, oh man, what a great idea. Can you install that right now? I mean, would you be able to do it right then, or would we have to make a future appointment in most cases?
No, we'd be able to do it right then. We actually stock these green parts on the trucks now. And in almost every case, especially when it comes to replacement parts, we could do it right then and there.
So that's called the dual flush retrofit?
It is, yeah. We, some Roto-Rooter locations in certain parts of the country might be using a different brand, but we're partnering with a company called MJSI Incorporated, and I like the company because the guy who founded the company is both a licensed plumber, a master plumber, in fact, and an engineer. So he's got just the right qualifications to just design some really great stuff, and he's come up with a dual flush kit that is relatively easy for our guys to install. They can do it pretty quickly, and it just makes such a difference.
So much easier, too, than having to swap out the entire toilet. And I'm thinking about this now. Tell me if this isn't a great training aid. If you're trying to teach your kids, you're toilet training them to go number 1, number 2, you can really put some teeth into it this way. I mean, this is going to make it a real learning experience, right?
Well, ironically, my own son is 3, and we just gotten him off of the diapers in the last few months, and he is doing exactly what you said. He's pushing the small button for pee-pee and the big button for everything else. And it's good. And I like to, I try to raise my kids in an environment where they appreciate how much water is being used. We've got one of those big corner jacuzzi tubs in the house that we bought, and sometimes they'll want to use that, but I always tell them, no, let's use your bathtub. It uses so much less water. And so, it's just, I think when you raise them that way and teach them those sorts of green values from the start, then they appreciate that.
That's so true. Making it part of our DNA is such a great point, Paul. So let's now move on from there. Now, first of all, Mike and I are sitting here, and we think we hear a lot, we see a lot. We've never even heard of this. So are you the first company putting out this dual flush retrofit?
As a matter of fact, there are probably some small plumbers, regional, local plumbers around the country who just got the green thing going. Who knows how far back, some guys were actually jury rigging these things. But as far as I know, as far as major plumbing companies, we're the first to actually make these things widely available. And Roto-Rooter's got a history. We are a pretty sizable company, and one of the things we can do is take some of these high-tech devices in some cases and obscure devices and bring them to the forefront and make them common. So you'll find in a Roto-Rooter, a guy, one of our service technicians, he's going to have one of these high-tech fiber optic cameras to inspect your plumbing, whereas maybe some small guy can't afford to bring those products forth. So we're trying to do that with these green parts. We've looked far and wide for some really good stuff that makes sense and is going to hold up. That's just as important as anything. and we've tried to just bring these parts to the forefront and make them widely available.
Before we continue our tour through the Brady household, let's stay at the toilet for a second. Now, what people always want to know is pocketbook. How expensive is it? And more important than that, what's my return on investment? How quickly will the water savings then return the investment? Do you have any sort of ROI on that kind of dual flush retrofit that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what we're doing at Roto-Rooter is we've got 5 test families that we're following on Roto-Rooter.com under the Roto Green heading. And we've got a single guy, we've got an empty nester couple, we have a family of 4, and we have a family of 6, plus we have an apartment building. I think it's 16 apartments in it. And what we're doing is we've made changes, green changes to each of these family archetypes, and we're monitoring their water bills for a year. So we'll show on the site, here's what they paid in water and sewer cost in October 2009, and here's what they'll pay in October 2010. So you can see a side-by-side comparison, and I'm actually working on better graphs that will provide more information that we're going to be putting up on the site shortly. But that shows some of the cost. It's a little challenging to get the apples-to-apples thing. And the reason for that, guys, is that water and sewer costs are going up so quickly in some parts of the country that if you look at what they were paying last year in water and then you look at the savings, you might go, oh, gosh, well, hey, that month they only saved $8 on their bill. What's the big deal? But the larger story that sometimes an Excel graph doesn't tell you is that, well, yeah, but if they hadn't made these changes, their water bills would have cost them another $18 or $20 above what you're seeing here, because every year, and I think we can safely say from now on, the days of cheap water and sewer are behind us. Yeah. It's going to get higher and higher. But here's our goal, to answer your question. We're working on this now. Right now, as of today, while you and I are speaking, we don't have that completely nailed down. You're going to pay a plumber charge, which is, okay, here's what it costs by the job. What I'm trying to do now is bundle things so that we can say, okay, here's how much Roto-Rooter can save you in a year. So what we're trying to do is make it so that whatever the cost is, you're going to make it back in a year in water and sewer savings. That's our goal. Is it there today? No, but I hope within the next couple of months we'll finally have that just worked out and put in place. Because let's face it, if you're looking at a return after 18 or 24 months, you're going to go, I don't know. If I'm really a green-oriented person, I'm going to say, yeah, I'll do that. But if I'm not, let's face it, money talks. So if we can give those folks a return on their investment of, say, a year, then I think we're going to attract a lot more people. So we're working through that, crunching numbers. Prices vary for Roto-Rooter market by market, so it's not the easiest thing in the world to work out, but we're determined to do it.
Well, Paul, you're talking about the return on the investment in a year's time, but one of the things that I think there's really no arguing about, especially for those of us who live in the Central Valley here in California, water has been such a big issue, not only here in the Central Valley, up and down the state, but there's other areas in the country, Georgia, for example, in parts of the South, just suffering drought-like conditions for the last several years. A really disturbing statistic is the one that I found on your site as well, the green portion of Roto-Rooter.com, that between 1900 and 1995, the rate of population growth raised twofold. Global water consumption grew sixfold. That just kind of is a harbinger of things to come when it comes to the water that we have to share and how we've got to be better stewards of it. And you're just right on the money with some of these retrofits and these green tips that people can put into everyday practice in their everyday living at home.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not only is water becoming scarce and therefore more expensive, but on the flip side, and that's another one of the strengths we have at Roto-Rooter, is you also pay for what goes back down into the sewer. And if your If you're saving money by putting a dual flush in or a low flow shower head or what have you, then that's less water down the drain. And when they don't typically meter that, some markets do, but they don't typically meter that every month like your water, but they'll take 2 or 3 months out of the year and say, okay, from November to January, Mike used X number of thousands of gallons of water. So that's how much we're going to charge him on sewer. We're going to determine that his sewer rate is this many gallons, so that's what he's going to pay for the next year. So if you make these changes and your water going down the drain is cut back significantly, then you're going to save a lot of money on the sewer side too.
That's amazing. So now, I want to leave the toilet area and get the rest of Mike's house done here. But before we leave the toilet area, what for people who don't want the dual flush, who want the EPA Watersense toilet, that's right up your alley at Roto-Rooter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We switch out a lot of toilets, and those new toilets are fantastic. You don't have to make a choice like you do with the dual flush.
Right.
They just use 1.28 gallons of water with every flush, and that's a pretty significant savings.
So that's an option also when it comes to the toilet area.
It is, and those so if you've got an older toilet, that what we do is we say the Watersense toilets are great for our customers who have older toilets that require 3.5 gallons of flush or 5 gallons of flush. Some of them even up to 7 gallons of flush if they're pretty old. So the 1.28 gallon ultra efficient toilets make the most sense for those customers. But again, if you have a 1.6 gallon toilet, it's probably a lot more cost effective to have Roto-Rooter rebuild your existing toilet with these green parts than to pay us to replace the entire toilet. And you'll actually save more water over time with a dual flush than with a 1.28 gallon toilet, because again, 80% of your flushes will use less than a gallon of water with a dual flush. So that is the case. And it's also worth mentioning that we have retrofits for urinals and commercial flushometer style toilets that yield similar water savings for business customers.
Well, Paul, we have about 5 minutes, and I want you to walk with the Bradys throughout the rest of the house and point out what else they could do in their bathroom, shower, their bathtubs, and the other rooms in the house, the kitchens and the laundry, so our listeners can get a little taste of how this really works.
Happy to do it. The shower is a major water waster. Most shower heads today use between 2.2 and 4 gallons of water every minute. So Roto-Rooter's standard replacement shower head now is one of these next-generation low-flow models that use only 1.5 gallons of water per minute.
Wow.
So its flow is so good and so strong. I've got 2 in my house. You won't even notice that you're using a low-flow shower head until you look at your water bill. So imagine saving, say, 2.5 gallons per minute over your old shower head. And we know through our research that the average shower is about 13 minutes. So that's a savings of 33 gallons of water with every shower.
Wow.
And if you assume that a person takes a shower every day, then that's an annual savings of about 12,043 gallons per person.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
It is. And if it's a family of 4, that's 48,000 gallons of water a year.
Hey, we could, little things, as Mike and I always talk about, little things can add up to make big differences. Walk us through the sinks, faucets, the kitchens, and the laundry room.
Okay. Now, older bathroom faucets will use about 3.5 gallons of water a minute if the tap's wide open. The EPA Watersense program puts their stamp of approval on any faucet flowing at about 1.5 gallons a minute or less. And Roto-Rooter can replace your faucets with a Watersense-approved faucet, but let's face it, faucets are expensive. So if your faucet's in good condition and it's not leaking, we'll swap out the aerator. That's that little round screw-on screen on the tip of your faucet with a water-saving version that will cut down your flow to a maximum of, say, 1 gallon a minute or even 0.5 gallon a minute. You just don't need all that extra water if you're brushing your teeth or you're shaving. So all that water's flowing down the drain. And that's not a difficult fix. So if you're a DIY kind of guy, go to the hardware store and find them and do them yourself. You don't have to pay us to do it, but just do the right thing and get it done.
Right. Great point.
So, and I guess some of the other things we're working on, so you've got sinks, faucets. You can do it with a kitchen sink, but let's face it, you're not usually running that so much unless you're rinsing your dishes that way. You could, so we don't typically cut down the flow as much on a kitchen sink. The other area we're looking at, turning our attention to, is water heaters.
Okay.
Tankless water heaters. they've got these new efficient heaters that are hybrids that are just about as efficient as the tankless type. So I think those make good sense. The solar water heating, some of our West Coast Roto-Rooter locations are doing that. We hope to take that nationwide. We're not there yet, but we're crawling before we walk, so we're on our way there.
Hey, Paul, we're down to the last 2 minutes. We also have so many of our listeners in the Sun Belt and here in California. How about the outside water conservation? Are there some tricks or there's some great hints that you can give to our listeners using Roto-Rooter, or just them themselves can do to help conserve water on their outside usage?
Yeah, watering is such a they've got heads now that are directed, and they're much better than the early water heads that used to be on home watering systems. So they're directed. They'll use less. If they're misting, you don't want that kind because they will evaporate. A lot of that water evaporates. It's just wasted. And timers, my goodness, the timers change everything. And there's really a lot of water savings to be had if you use the timers.
Got it. And then, so what else, last few comments on Roto-Rooter and what you're doing with Roto-Green. Any other few things you want to tell our listeners in the last minute?
Well, I'd say this. Are we perfect? No, we're not. We've got a little ways to go, and we're happy to take suggestions from people on ways that we can improve. Well, this is our first. We spent about a year designing this program, and we're determined to see it through and to keep coming up with new ways to save water and help our customers. So I think that's just the only attitude you can have. It's not a big business thing for us. We're determined that we're going to do it. If going green and saving water falls out of fashion next year, we're going to keep it up.
Well, Paul, Mike Brady and I are really appreciative and thankful for your time today. And this is great to see an iconic, wonderful, great brand like Roto-Rooter, which was invented and started in 1935, go green now, is such an honor and so great to share with our listeners. We just want to say thank you very much. We want to send our listeners to your great website, rotorooter.com, and click on the Roto Green button. Paul Abrams, you are truly living proof that green is good.